dormitories on April 14, some of the girls have managed to escape. CFI has those details.
It's the first time in Africa that a country other than Nigeria is hosting a mobilization event against the abduction of the 234 schoolgirls in Chibok. In Niamey, Niger, dozens of men and women got together to denounce both the kidnappings and the silence of ECOWAS and the African Union over the fate of these young Nigerians abducted more than 3 weeks ago. The women in Niger addressed a message to the United Nations.
Femmes de la société civile nigérienne,
we, women from civil society in Niger, are asking the United Nations Security Council to bring this case to the International Criminal Court so that all leaders of Boko Haram are charged with crimes against humanity. On a world scale, mobilization around the Nigerian schoolgirls is getting stronger and stronger. In the UK, Nigeria's former colonial power, hundreds took to the streets to demand the release of the kidnapped girls. The demonstration took place in London 24 hours after American movie star Angelina Jolie launched a call while she was on a visit to the British capital to present her new film.
The important thing, though, is that we understand that this happened because these men feel that they can get away with this and they can do this, because there have been too many examples of the past where there is so much impunity.
Other than celebrities, including Bob Geldof, many organizations representing Muslims are denouncing the kidnapping of the Nigerian schoolgirls, and they are launching a call to the authorities across the world.
My organization strongly urges the immediate use of any and all resources possible to locate all of the schoolgirls that remain in captivity and grant them safe passage in returning home to their loved ones.
In Nigeria itself, demonstrations continue. On Friday in Lagos, hundreds demanded one more time that the authorities help bring back the girls to their families. And for the first time, the names of the 234 schoolgirls were made public.
we are releasing the names. We're hoping that when they release the pictures, we can come out, because we want people to be aware that they're not just statistics or some faceless people. No, they are children.
Intensifying mobilization in Nigeria has led to one concrete result: the implication of the Western powers in the search for the 234 schoolgirls. In this context, dozens of military and other experts from the US and the UK have already arrived in Nigeria.
South Sudanese President Salva Kiir and Labour leader Riek Machar are holding talks in the Ethiopian capital Addis Ababa to negotiate an end to the civil war. The talks are intended to speed up the process of reconciliation and put a stop to the ethnic war ravaging the country. We have more in this story by CFI, which looks at the UN report which blames both sides for crimes against humanity.
The President of South Sudan, Salva Kiir, arrived in the Ethiopian capital Friday to hold direct talks with rebel chief Riek Machar. The meeting is aimed at stemming almost 5 months of bloodshed. Kiir and Machar have been under intense international pressure to find a solution. During their talks, the two men will discuss power sharing, but President Kiir said it is out of the question for him to give up power. There is hope the meeting will bring peace and allow full implementation of the ceasefire agreement, which has not yet been applied since it was signed in January.
It will speed up the processes of reconciliation, because what will happen is that fighting must stop, that this bleeding must stop. That is the priority. And number two, that there should be a sense for humanitarian assistance to those who are affected, displaced internally, those who have been displaced from their homes. So humanitarian assistance is a priority.
South Sudan has been ravaged by an ethnic war for the past 5 months that has killed over 1,000 and displaced 1 million people. Hours before the meeting is supposed to begin, a spokesman for the rebels said President Kiir's soldiers have still not laid down their weapons. The meeting comes the day after the United Nations said both sides in the country's brutal civil war likely carried out crimes against humanity. Meanwhile, fierce fighting still rages, and the UN has warned of a risk of severe famine and genocide.
So we are taking this opportunity to inform the world that President Salva Kiir is not serious about having a political solution to the conflict. He believes in a military option, and that's why his forces are on offensive everywhere in Greater Upper Nile State.
The United Nations said that crimes against humanity committed by both sides will not go unpunished.
Russians celebrated a Victory Day parade on Friday, marking the end of the Second World War. The celebrations, presided over by President Vladimir Putin, reminded his people about their patriotic spirit, and a police officer has been killed in the Venezuelan capital Caracas during clashes between anti-government protesters and the riot police. For more on those and other stories, let's turn to this World News Roundup.
Russia held its Victory Day parade on Friday in Moscow, commemorating the end of the Second World War. It was an occasion for President Vladimir Putin to remind the crowd of the Russian patriotic spirit that helped to assure victory. This is a celebration of the invincible power of patriotism. It is a time when all of us feel deep within us what it means to be faithful to the motherland and how important it is to stand for her interests. After the ceremony, President Putin left for Crimea, recently annexed by Moscow. The annexation has provoked the worst crisis between Russia and the West since the Cold War. A police officer was killed on Thursday in the Venezuelan capital Caracas during a raid on an encampment set up by anti-government protesters. In the midst of the fighting, 3 police officers were shot, 1 fatally. More than 240 people were arrested. Since February, protesters have demanded the resignation of President Nicolas Maduro for his failure to rein in inflation and rampant crime. More than 40 people have been killed since the protests began. Some 40,000 university and grade school students marched through the streets of the Chilean capital Santiago on Thursday to pressure President Michelle Bachelet, who assumed office in March, to honor her campaign promises. Since 2011, students have held regular protests to demand reforms to Chile's largely privatized educational system, which they say is unfair. The system was established under the ex-dictator Augusto Pinochet. Italy's former Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi arrived on Friday at the Sacra Famiglia nursing home outside Milan to begin his community service. Convicted of tax fraud, the 77-year-old Mr. Berlusconi was sentenced to 4 hours of community service per week. Along with a 1-year prison sentence, the court also banned Mr. Berlusconi from taking part in politics for 2 years. After he completes 6 months of community service at the home, Mr. Berlusconi's sentence will be reduced by 6 weeks.
And in sports, stakeholders in Gambian football have converged for a meeting they say was necessitated by the recent suspension of 4 senior elected officials of the Gambia Football Federation. Babukar Senghor reports majority of the members are unhappy about the development and are calling for the return to normalcy in Gambian football.
We hear before, the answer is an emphatic yes. The announcement in midweek by the Minister of Youth and Sports of the suspension of the President of the Gambia Football Federation and 3 Vice Presidents has triggered an avalanche of fury among majority of stakeholders in Gambian football. Their very way of expressing their feelings was staged through a hastily convened meeting of members representing football clubs and affiliate groups from across the country. The mood here is one of disappointment and more critically a feeling of utter frustration, with members fearing the return to what they refer to as the abysmal 18-month cycle following the dissolution of the previously elected GFA executive.
If there is a problem within or outside the Gambia Football Federation, what the National Sport Council should do is to call all the stakeholders in football, the regions, the clubs, the allied association, to discuss with them and also to seek for their consent what is the way forward.
Others are more forthright in their assessment. Yahya